There we be. So, yeah, last week we started on Unit 3 on old hearing aid or early hearing aid fitting methods. And last week we went on about, what do you call it, the half gain rule, Lybarger, why you have to you can't give full gain for the hearing loss and all that stuff. You can't mirror the hearing loss with full gain because input plus gain is output. And a person's loudness tolerance level is probably around 100 dBHL. So sure, if you have a 50 decibel hearing loss, I can amplify a 5 dB tone by 50 decibels because 5 plus 50 is 55. Not bad. But if the input is 50, I can't give a gain of 50 to an input of 50 because my output will now be 100, and that's going to be too loud. That was the basis behind the half gain rule. And we talked a lot about functional gain, where we tested someone's hearing under headphones and you had a hearing loss. And I'll pull up the PowerPoint slide to even show that, just for the sheer heck of it. All right. And we pulled up a slide looking something. We said because of this problem, and because of this problem, and because of this problem, we're all the same, reduced dynamic range. You can't take an average sound like the yellow bar here, and I can't amplify that by the full degree of the loss because you'll send that yellow bar way down here. So I'm giving an average input like speech half gain, and I'm amplifying it by half the degree of the loss. This guy's loss is 50, so I'm going to amplify this 60 decibel input by 25. And 60 is average speech in dBHL, so I give half the gain for that. Cool. So we said last week you cannot mirror the audiogram with full-on gain, because a 5 decibel sound, sure, I can amplify that by the full degree of the loss. Whoops. Okay, all I'm doing in the right panel here is taking the left one and flipping it right side up. That's all. So you're looking at here, I can amplify a 5 dB sound by the full degree of the loss, no problem. But if the input is 50, I can't amplify by the full degree of the loss. And so what people did, let's see if I can find this particular slide here because I want to find my functional gain slide. It'll be down here a little bit. There it is, found it. So they would amplify a hearing loss by half. So first the thresholds unaided under headphones. Then they would take the hearing aid singular because nobody fit binaurally in those days, okay? And they'd test the guy's thresholds again in sound field. And you'd want to aid so that your aided thresholds were half improved. And that meant that I was amplifying this 60 decibel high frequency loss by 30 dB of gain, and the hoped for output would be this. So you did this to get this. Okay, never mind that stupid little A popping up. It keeps doing that, forget that. But you did this because your hoped for output would be that aided speech would sit nicely in the listener's dynamic range. Here's loudness discomfort level, here's his thresholds, so that aided speech would be lifted up by about 30 dB instead of by the full degree of his loss. So, and that's all because hearing aids were linear, and you have a reduced dynamic range. And you add 1 and 2 together and you get 3. It gives you the reason for the half gain method. Now the half gain method gave birth to 4 kids. And the oldest name was Reuben, just teasing. The 4 children of the half gain method: Burger,
I don't know that I should be
Pogo,
right
Libby, and Now. So if we look at our notes from last week,
yeah, no.
Okay, here's your fitting methods. You can't mirror the audiogram with full-on gain. Here you go. Can't do this. So we know that. We covered that last week. So we had the great compromise was reached with the half gain rule. And we talked all about that. A plus B is C. There you go. Half gain fitting methods assume linear gain, and linear hearing aids give the same gain for all input. Someone asked a question last week, I believe it was Angela, and she said, well, what about soft sounds? Would they be given more than half gain? Yeah. And loud sounds, should they be given less than half gain? Yep. But hearing aids in those days were linear. And linear hearing aids means the hearing aid gives the same gain for a whisper, for average speech, and for yelling. So hearing aid fitting methods all had one target, because the target you chose was for average speech input. You knew that when the person was getting a whisper, he'd want to turn up his volume. And when someone started yelling, he'd want to turn down his volume. But for average speech, the targets were showing about half gain. Okay?
Hey,
So that's all that's
the
the
timer?
input you cared about, because
For how long?
average speech is what you're mostly listening to.
Hello?
Okay? I hear someone talking, saying, hello, how's it going? I'll do my echo from Canada. Hello, 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 hello. So anyhow, guess what? We've got snow. We actually got snow. We got about an inch of snow outside. Bummer. It's coldest we've had all winter. It's about 28 degrees here today. Kind of cool. Never been this cold all winter. This is the first time. Now, what's it like in Missouri? What's it like? How cold are you guys right now down there?
43.
Yesterday, we were almost 70, and today we're 55.
Nice. Not
Thursday,
bad.
we're going to be 14.
Can't come. Oh, wow. You really go up and down, don't you? Wow. There's an excursion for you. Good night, nurse. Okay. Okay. Back on target. So early fitting methods always had one target. For any particular hearing loss, a target would be generated that was kind of hovering around half the gain for that person. Because you wanted half gain for average speech inputs, you knew you'd want more than half gain for soft inputs and less than half gain for loud input. But hey, that's what a volume wheel's for, because all hearing aids had volume controls. So the guy, you could tell the linear hearing aid wearer because he always had his hands on his hearing aid. He was always adjusting the volume of his hearing aids. Today we have compression. And as you learned last semester, compression gives different gains for different inputs. And yep, more than half gain for soft, half gain sort of kind of around for average, and less than half gain for loud. So the half gain method gave birth to 4 kids: Burger, Pogo, Libby, and Now. We'll cover the comparisons of those today. Next week we'll be in Unit 4, and we'll cover today's fitting methods. We'll be looking at Now 1, Now 2, DSL 5, all that stuff. But for right now, I think it's always important to know where we came from, because that helps us appreciate where we are now. And that's kind of this historical overview. It's what we're doing. So if I look at good old notes now, and where was we? Okay. And some hearing aid fitting methods. So today's fitting methods, compression may give more than half gain for very soft sounds. So therefore, today's compression-based methods often have 3 targets: a target for soft inputs, a target for average inputs, and a target for loud inputs, because the hearing aid automatically gives those different kinds of gain. But in the days of yore, they didn't. So this is the main way you can tell new from early fitting methods, because you have more than one target for any particular hearing loss. Still, however, no one fitting method has been proven to be the best. And I think that says a lot about the fact that it's hair cell damage. We're not like the eye, and hearing loss isn't conductive, it's sensory neural. And because hearing loss is sensory neural, therefore there is a plurality of fitting methods with an S behind it. Some fitting methods even addressed conductive versus sensory neural loss. Look at this. The early Now did that. And you know why? Because conductive hearing loss is a mechanical blockage. It's a physical blockage. So if you have a flat 50 dB conductive loss and you can't fix it medically, So the person can't get surgery for it. Let's say they just wear hearing aids. Let's say if the person has otosclerosis, okay, and has a 50 decibel hearing loss due to otosclerosis, and he opts against surgery because sometimes the surgery for otosclerosis makes it worse. Okay, so he opts for hearing aids. That 50 dB conductive loss is given more gain than a 50 dB sensory neural loss, because sensory neural loss is just hair cell damage, whereas conductive loss is a physical blockage. So the two hearing losses, even though they're the same amount in dB, you give a little bit more for conductive loss, because conductive loss is a physical blockage. So that's where Nall even addressed it. So conductive loss, how much more gain would they give? They'd recommend additional gain equal to about 1/4 of the airborne gap at each frequency. So that's what this highlighted thing is here. Okay, they'd ask for a little bit more gain for conductive than for sensory neural. This is an important paragraph right here too, and it tells us old versus new methods. The old methods have one target, the new methods have more than one target. One target only is because the hearing aids were linear. So let's look at what Carhart did, and we'll dispense with it. He had a comparison method, didn't have any targets. He just tried several hearing aids on a person and saw which one did the best for speech discrimination and which one the person liked the best. And there was no real prescription targets per se. Selection procedure was based largely on the individual skill of the clinician, but this makes it hard to transmit or convey fitting methods from clinic to clinic. So here came the half gain rule, and then several methods were born out of the half gain rule, but each of them based on the half gain method in their own particular way. They each used a different kind of math to calculate the targets from audiogram thresholds, and it enabled clinicians to communicate consistent fitting methods from clinic to clinic. That was the beauty of them. Okay, they each used their own kind of weird little math to come up with the targets for any particular loss. So the target prescribes the amount of gain for any particular loss with the hearing aid at user volume. Remember, you always want some reserve volume. You're looking at the volume of a hearing aid being about 2/3 up. That meant you had another third headroom to go. So you'd want to hit the target with the hearing aid at 2/3 volume. This was the general idea. Now today, hearing aids often don't even have volume controls. But again, this is the development of fitting methods. This is how they came up. So, and we talked about functional gain last week. That was the old way of measuring hearing aid performance. You did your thresholds. And then you did sound. What you did here is you did thresholds under headphones, and then you did thresholds in sound field with the hearing aid. So this statement is a little bit wrong. Right where you're seeing that grade out there is a little bit wrong, okay? They took the thresholds that you found under headphones, and then they put the hearing aid on in a sound field in front of the speaker and looked to get half gain. Okay, and that's because the speakers and the headphones were calibrated to be equal, and everybody had a sound field system in their clinic, and that's just how you did it. Then you began to get insertion gain, and that came out with Real Ear, and that's the title of this course is Real Ear, and that's what we'll be talking about big time. And Real Ear began with insertion gain. And newer Real Ear gave up gain completely and focuses completely on output. And today's Real Ear is called speech mapping. So old fitting methods, new fitting methods. Old Real Ear, new Real Ear. Always remember there's the old and the new, and they're wrapped around each other like carrots, because the old fitting methods began to dump functional gain and use Real Ear. And Real Ear and the fitting methods existed for a while, and then compression came out. And when compression evolved, Then the fitting methods evolved. Instead of having one target, they had three. And Real Ear evolved. Real Ear dumped gain and said, forget you, it's all about output. Nobody gives a rat's butt about gain. Gain's just how you got there. It's the output that's hitting the eardrum. The output is the groceries that are delivered to the doorstep of your eardrum. Gain is just, how did you get there? So gain today is so, it's like me, and I think I said this to you last week. It's how did you get the bread from the store? Yeah. But gain is like, well, did you ride your bike? Did you walk? Did you drive? Did you take a train? Did you fly? Who gives a crap? Did you get the bread? So gain is just a means to an end. But people used to focus on gain like crazy because of the half gain rule. They didn't have Real Ear. All you had was a guy sitting under headphones, raising his hand or pushing a button, and then you took the hearing aid on, and Lybarger theorized, hey, if you give half gain, then input speech will be given half gain, and it'll nicely sit between his thresholds and his loudness discomfort levels. So that's why the focus was on gain. And then Real Ear followed suit. Instead of doing functional gain where the guy's raising his hand in a sound field with the hearing aid on, now they took a probe tube, stuck it in his ear canal, and measured his unaided ear canal resonance. Then they would hold the tube really carefully, and they'd put the hearing aid in at 2/3 volume, and then they'd have sound, the same sound coming out of the speaker, and they'd look for the half gain. And they called that insertion gain. And insertion gain was nice because it was fast. You could do it in like 5 minutes, you're done. It's not sitting there retesting the guy's thresholds in a sound field. You're just sticking a tube in his ear, and you're measuring Real Ear unaided response, and that's your outer ear canal resonance. That's how we learned about outer ear canal resonance that you studied in anatomy. That's how we learned about the peak resonances at 2,700 hertz, and it starts at 1,500 hertz, and then it goes up to 4, and then it drops. I mean, we found that out by doing Real Ear. You did open unaided ear canal resonance, and then you kept the tube in place, stuck the hearing aid in, 2/3 volume, had the same sound coming out of the speaker, and you found out what the difference was. And the difference was insertion gain, aided versus unaided SPL at the eardrum. Insertion gain. Then compression evolved. We dumped insertion gain. We kept doing Real Ear, keep the tube in, but we don't care about the gain. We want to know the output. And then they take the guy's thresholds on the audiogram, flip it right side up, so it's now an SPLogram. So all the thresholds are changed into dB-SPL. Then you take the hearing aid, put it in, and now the guy's thresholds are going up instead of going down. On the audiogram, they're going down, but in SPL, flipped upside down, now they're going up. And you're looking at, where's soft speech output? Is it barely audible to the guy? Great, because normal hearing people can barely hear soft speech too. Average input, is it fairly now above the guy's thresholds? Good. Loud speech input, is it exceeding the guy's loudness discomfort levels? Bad, turn it down. 3 targets, 1 for soft, 1 for average, 1 for loud. And it's all based on output. So that's how things evolved. And NAL followed suit and became NAL 1. And then it became NAL 2. But all of those things are focused on the way we changed doing Real Ear. So back to my set of lies, we'll do a quick description about the 4 children of the half gain rule. Move on down. Here, 4 kids. The first one's name was Berger. And there's a guy named Valenti, and he lives in St. Louis, Missouri, and he writes about it. So if you ever want to Google up Valenti and fitting methods, you'll find it all over the place. Okay? Several different, you get all 4 different methods, all based on variations of the half gain rule. Berger, from the 1970s. Now, I'm not sure if any of you guys remember a song by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, way back. 4 dead in Ohio, Tin soldiers and Nixon coming, they're finally on. Okay, that song came from riots at Kent State University, where the National Guard shot 4 students as demonstrating against the Vietnam War. And one of those students was a speech pathology student at Kent State University, Ohio. 4 dead in Ohio. Anyway, that's the same school that the Berger fitting method came from. Just thought I'd throw a little bit of history at you. What the hell, I'm 63, I deserve, I can do that. So here we go. Share screen. Berger. It came from the 1970s. It really likes a lot of gain at 1 and 2,000 hertz. It digs 2,000 hertz especially. It gives you 0.45 gain at 250, half gain at 500, a little bit more than half gain at 1,000, a little bit more than half gain at 2 grand, and then half gain again at 4. So the thing about the Berger method, it likes 1 and 2,000 hertz, especially 2. And the highlighted area is showing you the important points. Okay? 0.5 means half gain. 0.5 means half gain. But here, more than half gain, even at 3. So look at those frequencies. It liked them. Then came Pogo. Now, Pogo came from a guy named Berger. Is the guy was a professor, okay, at Kent State, audiology professor. Pogo came from a professor by the name of McCandless, McCandless, McCandless. Gary McCandless. Anyway, you don't need to know that. The thing is, it's called Prescription of Gain and Output. It's from the 80s. It likes a lot of high frequency gain, a lot like Berger, but it doesn't ask for as much mid and low. It says if you start doing that, you're going to get what they call the upward spread of masking. Now, do you remember what the upward spread of masking is? Lows mask highs better than highs mask lows, right? The rumble of a truck will cover the peeping of a canary better than the loud peeping of a canary will cover the rumbling of a truck. So Pogo means prescription of gain and output. Pogo, like a pogo stick. Anyway, so Pogo said if you give too much low and mid-frequency gain, especially like Berger is asking for all that gain at 1,000 hertz, it's going to mask 4,000 hertz. You don't want to do that. Focus on the high frequencies, but don't give so much gain as Berger in the mid-frequencies. They just had a disagreement. Then came Libby. Now, Libby, this is an interesting method. I find this is one of the most interesting fitting methods around. He said, half gain is too much. We want to give third gain. Half gain, most people with mild to moderate loss don't like half gain. It's too much. They want third gain. You know what? He's right. Most people prefer third gain. Hey, are any of you doing real ear? Let me just ask you. Sam, are you? Yeah. Now look at your fitting targets. You've been doing real ear. And look at your NAL 1 or NAL 2 fitting targets. They're not sitting in the middle of the guy's dynamic range, are they? They're down near about a third. See, Libby was right. He said sensory neural loss, and it means outer hair cell damage, mild to moderate, so we'll break it down and call it sensory. Sensory loss likes third gain. But if the loss turns neural, if the loss gets to be severe, those people like 2/3 gain. So you broke down hearing loss into 2 camps, mild to moderate and severe. And that's very good to do that, because that's exactly what sensory loss versus neural loss. Outer hair cell damage, outer and inner hair cell damage. WDRC for mild to moderate loss, output limiting compression for severe. Hey, all that division, Well, Libby's the first sign that I've ever seen of that. So looking at our notes, what does it say about Libby? Check it out. So Libby, third gain. 5 dB less than half gain at 250 and 3 dB less than that at 500 hertz. Actually, I should say, yeah, and severe loss prefers 2/3 gain. So the prescription changed for this particular population. And all this is written about in chapter 4 in my textbook, Compression for Clinicians. Gives a breakdown of these 4 methods and a comparison as well. Then came number 4, now R. And now R was kind of an interesting method. Let's look at now R. So here's Berger, the first one. And the reason why Berger liked so much gain at 3,000, at 2,000, and at 1,000, the reason it liked it so much is because of this. See this articulation index? There's your speech banana. And in the speech banana, you can see there's exactly 100 dots. And each dot represents 1% of audible speech required for you to understand what the word was. And notice most of the dots are clustered right here. That's why Berger did this. Berger did this because of this. Okay? Most of the cues for understanding speech are between 1 and 4,000 hertz. So he gave buku gain at 1,000, 2, and 3. Okay. Then came Pogo, prescription of gain and output, 1980s, less mid and low frequency gain, less than half gain for lows to prevent the upward spread of masking, half gain at all frequencies, and 10 dB less than half gain at 250, 5 dB less than half gain at 500. Pogo. So you can really see they backed off on the low to mid frequencies. Then Libby. 1/3 and 2/3 gain. Similar to Pogo, except for mild to moderately severe sensory, in other words. Multiply each by 1/3, each threshold by 1/3, not half. Clients don't prefer half gain. They find it too loud. And then look at this, 5 dB less than 1/3 gain at 250. 3 dB less than 1/3 gain of 500. So in your notes, this is incorrect. Change those halves to third. 5 dB less than 1/3 gain at 250. 3 dB less than 1/3 gain at 500. The PowerPoint slide has it correct. Okay? And then for severe to profound hearing loss, these guys like more gain. Interesting. An interesting method. So you've covered 3 of the 4 methods. And then we'll show comparisons. But let's look at number 4. This one hails from the land down under. Do you come from the land down under? He just smiled and gave me a Vegemite sandwich. Okay, anyhow, now, does not try to preserve loudness relationships among the speech frequencies. Looky at the audiogram. Look at how soft K, F, S, T, H, R compared to Z, V, J. I mean, all vowel sounds. I'll sound like a chimpanzee. But anyway, all the sounds that are loud and low compared to consonants, soft and high. So this is the relationship among unaided speech frequencies, right? That's generally the audiometric relationship between the sounds of speech, unaided, on an audiogram. Now said, screw it. Now just said, forget that. We don't care. If that's the way normal hearing people hear, we don't care. When we amplify, we want to make all adjacent speech frequencies contribute equally to the overall loudness. We don't want to make it that the vowels are heard louder than the consonants. We don't believe in that. That's not our belief. I know that's the way normal hearing people hear speech. They hear the vowels louder than the consonants. We don't want to preserve that loudness relationship among adjacent speech frequencies for the hearing impaired. When we amplify for the hearing impaired, we're going to amplify so that every frequency of speech contributes equally to its overall perceived loudness. And that is why now backed off a lot on certain frequencies. Look at this. So here's what it is. Instead, now tries to make all speech frequencies contribute equally to its overall loudness. Now does not preserve this loudness relationship. So what did now do? The original now really went nuts. The original now is the white on this graph. Pretend the person has no hearing loss, 0. This is what now the original now did. They cut down the low frequency amplification by like 15 dB. Okay, so they said, we want to, in the speech banana here, if you're looking at this thing here, we want to really decrease the loudness of these guys, really decrease the loudness of the highs. So pretend you have no hearing loss. You have 0 dB hearing loss. To hear all the frequencies equally loud of speech, okay, in order to hear all these speech frequencies equally loud, you'd have to decrease these by about 15. And you'd even decrease the highs a little bit. Later on, now got revised, now R. And they said, you know what? We had overkill. We decreased the lows too much. You shouldn't decrease the lows as much. So in order to make all adjacent speech frequencies sound equally loud, we need to reduce the lows by more like 10, not by 15. And we don't need to reduce the highs by much at all. We got to just back off a little bit. But again, to read this picture here, it's saying, if you had no hearing loss, how much would you be reducing the low frequencies to make all adjacent speech frequencies sound equally loud? And the original now really said to reduce them. Revised said, reduce them, but not quite as much. This means now R asks for a little bit more low frequency gain than the original now did. Okay, in all essence, that's what the bottom line is. The original now asked for less or prescribed less low frequency gain, and now R prescribed a little bit more. But here's the other thing about now. It has 3 things that they do to come up with their targets. Now R does 3 things. The original did 2, but it changed the amount it changed number 3 a little bit. Now does 3 things. It looks at the particular frequency, 1,000 hertz, and whatever the threshold was, it multiplies that by 0.31. It also takes the Parent-Teachers Association, pure tone average, whatever the pure tone average was of that person, it multiplies that by 0.05. Now, 0.05 just means dividing it by 20, isn't it? If your pure tone average was 40, what's 40 times 0.05? I don't know, get my calculator out here. 40 times 0.05 equals 2. So multiplying something by 0.05 is the same as dividing it by 20. And that's going to stay the same, of course, for the audiogram, because the pure tone average is the pure tone average is the pure tone average. 5, 1, and 2. It's the threshold of 5, 1, and 2. Then you're looking at the thresholds. Each threshold, you're basically dividing that by 3 or multiplying it by 0.31. Okay? So you're adding number 1 together, you're adding number 2, and then you're adding number 3. And number 3 is the different values at each frequency to make speech sound equally loud. Here. So here, look at the letters down the side, or the columns down the side. 250 reduce that by 17 dB. 500, reduce that by 8. 750, reduce that by 3. 1,000 and 1,500, add 1. 2,000 hertz, reduce by 2. 4,000, reduce by 2. 6,000, reduce by 2. Please don't memorize this stuff. You don't need to. Just get the general gist. What Now did to come up with their target was at each frequency, they took the pure tone average, and they took that, and then they took the threshold in question, the particular frequency in question, whatever it was, 250 hertz, whatever the threshold was at 250 hertz, they added that to the pure tone average that they had multiplied by 0.05. They took the threshold at 250, multiplied that by 3.31, added it to this. And then they took these two things, and then they looked at this table here and they said, oh, and now subtract 17. Okay, that whatever that is, that's the target gain for 250 hertz. Then they looked at 500 hertz. Took the pure tone average, the same pure tone average that you had multiplied by 0.05, so maybe it had 2, whatever that was. Then you took the threshold at 500 hertz, you multiplied that by 0.31, so you added 2 and whatever this worked out to be. And then you looked at this table and you subtracted 8. That's the target gain you wanted for 500 hertz. Then they looked at 1,000 hertz, took the same pure tone average that had been multiplied by 0.05, took the threshold at 1,000 hertz, multiplied that by 0.31, added these together, and then added 1. Okay, that's your target gain for 1,000 hertz, and so on, and so on. That's how they came up with their targets. So you've got Berger with its particular method of coming up with targets, doing this. You got Pogo doing this. You got Libby doing this. And you got Now doing this. So now let's compare. Let's look at how these 4 methods compare to each other. So here you have a hearing loss on your left. And this is out of Michael Valenti's book, way back in 1994. So the Berger target for this loss, look at this, lots at 1, lots at 2, lots at 3. So you can see that Berger is the powerhouse here. Then you're looking at Pogo, which is the plus signs. And Pogo likes a lot of high frequency gain, remember? Pogo likes lots of high frequency gain, but it gives less mid and low frequency gain. Less mid and low frequency gain. Then you've got Libby. Look at Libby. Third gain. Libby's the squares. Look at this. Third gain. And then you have Now, the triangles. And you can see that Now is a fairly weak formula too. It gives a little bit more than Libby, but Now is pretty weak too. And that is why Now became the most popular fitting method in the world. Gone was Berger. I remember when I was studying audiology in grad school, 1988, and Berger was already out of fashion. It was all about Pogo. Then a few years later, Now R came on the scene. Libby was tried by a few people, not many used it. And Now R became it. It hung the moon. Everybody was using Now R. In Europe, in the USA, Australia, Canada, everybody was using Now. So of those 4 methods, Now became by far the most popular. Libby had an interesting approach, but Now gave a little bit more than Libby, but it was the second weakest method. The second weakest. Look at our picture again here. Share screen. There. It's the triangles. So for this particular loss, it's the second weakest method. If you look at a different loss, a more of a precipitous loss, all 4 of the methods give nothing in the lows because the guy's got no hearing loss in the lows. Okay? But look at where they differ again. Burger, once again, the powerhouse. And then Pogo, once again, a lot like Burger at 4,000, but less than Burger for the mids. And then you've got Libby, the squares, third gain. And then you've got Now, the second weakest, became the most popular method around. And here's my comparison of the 4 fitting methods. So when I used to work at Unitron, I banked this hearing loss into the fitting software. And then I chose, okay, look at half gain. There's the blue. So half gain is going to be exactly half of this red here. And then look at the variations. Look at how Burger gives way more than half gain. How Pogo gives just like Burger at 4,000, but less in the mid and lows. How Libby, third gain, okay? And then look at Now R, right here. So it's really, Now R became such a popular fitting method. It was just a, so meanwhile, behind the fitting method scene, real ear measures emerged in 1988. So while Now R had come out and was used a lot, real ear measure emerged. Now keep in mind, the fitting method targets didn't change. Please remember that. The targets didn't change. You still had the big 4, Burger, Pogo, Libby, and Now, and the biggest of these was Now. So the targets, their calculations for the targets, all of that stayed intact. What changed? The way it was measured. Instead of using functional gain, where the guy's raising his hand under headphones and then aided, raising his hand in a sound field, and you were hoping that your A's were halfway above his thresholds. And you could do that with Now too if you wanted to. You could do that with Pogo if you wanted to. For example, well, just before we close here, because you know what? We've been doing good. We're just about done. But what I want to show you here, if you just go to functional gain, so I can just highlight this point. This might be showing you, for example, half gain, because the A's are halfway. Okay, notice this A isn't quite halfway. It's to reduce the upward spread of masking, but all the other ones are. If you were talking Now and you were using functional gain, you'd want these letter A's to be in a different spot. If you were fitting with Burger and you were using functional gain, you'd want these letter A's to be in yet again a different spot. Probably the letter A's with Burger would be doing this. Probably the letter A's with Libby would be doing this. Okay? Probably the letter A's with Pogo would be doing this. Okay? You'd really want to be amplifying the highs. So where you'd want your aided thresholds to be would differ according to the fitting method that you used. And that's why I said when we came down to this slide here, don't get a seizure, I'm flipping them real quick, I know. Meanwhile, behind the fitting method scene, everybody was using functional gain to hit their Burger targets. Can you imagine how long a hearing aid fitting would take? You'd be sitting there trying to adjust the hearing aid so that your aided threshold would match the target that you probably had to calculate by hand. So I'm serious. So hearing aid fittings took like over an hour. I mean, it was just like, so what happened was the fitting method targets didn't change, just the measurement method changed. Now you had real ear. So instead of behavioral functional gain, you had this. So here you go. This is your first peek into real ear. Here we go. Here's real ear unaided response. And what this meant was, look where it begins, 55. This meant 55 dB was coming out of the speaker in front of the computer. It's like I'm looking at my laptop now, and on the top of my laptop would be a speaker, just like real ear systems have, a speaker. And then a tone would come out. They didn't use speech. It would be a sweep tone. It would go like this. Do 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 do. It would be low, and all the while you were measuring the guy's ear canal resonance. So if the sound came out at 55, I'd measure 250 would be 55. And if 500 came out at 55, I'd be measuring 500 in my ear at 55. 1,000 came out at 55, I'd be measuring in my ear 1,000 at 55. Now here comes 2,000 comes out at 55, I'm measuring 70. 3,000 comes out at 55, I'm measuring 70. How come? Because my ear is resonating. You've hit the resonance of your ear canal. Okay? So keep that in mind when you're looking at this weird slide on your screen. The same 55 dB is coming out of the speaker at 250, 500, 750, 1,000, 1,500, and all of a sudden, whoa, you're measuring more because your outer ear canal is resonating. And once you get out to past 4,000 hertz, you lose the resonance. Okay, hold the tube carefully in place. Don't move it. Take the hearing aid, stick it on top of the tube, turn it to its 2/3 volume, and have the very same 55 come out of the speaker again. Do the loop, do the loop, do the loop, and look at this, real ear aided response. So real ear unaided response, real ear aided response. And what's the target? Well, this might be now. This could be the Libby. This could be the Pogo. This could be the Burger target for the hearing loss in question. For whatever hearing loss, maybe for this hearing loss, whatever. You're just picking a hearing loss, and I'm just drawing a fictitious target. So the target could be half gain, could be any one of those four methods we've discussed. So you'd look at real ear aided minus real ear unaided. Gives you the black, real ear insertion gain. And the computer did it for you. You didn't have to sit there with a calculator. You didn't need to remeasure the guy's thresholds. Nah. You just stuck a tube in his ear. Okay, that's done. Take the hearing aid out or in, turn it up, leave the tube in place. Done. If you matched the target, good. If you were below the target, oh, better change the settings and do it again. If you're above the target, change the settings, do it again. And change the settings until your real ear insertion gain matches the target. Once you've done that, knick-knack, paddywhack, give that dog a bone. You're done. Okay? That's insertion gain. And that's yesterday's real ear. We don't do that crap anymore. Some old farts, clinicians still do, but most people don't do that anymore. The focus today is more on output. So real ear doesn't look like this, but all real ear used to do this. I did this for years. Okay? So insertion gain, aided versus unaided SPL at the TM. If we say it here, functional gain, the difference between aided and unaided hearing thresholds. Insertion gain, aided versus unaided SPL at the TM. Okay, so the numbers are the same. The numbers you want are exactly the same. Then remember, the targets didn't change. So the target for any one particular method based on now, the target for any other particular method based on Pogo, okay, whatever it is, those didn't change, just your method of measurement changed. So the numerical quantities, when I go to here and share screen, if I go to this slide here, these numbers should be exactly what these numbers are. In fact, I think I drew that on purpose. Look at here, it's 30 at 2004. It's 30 at 2004. Okay, I did that on purpose to highlight the fact that the targets didn't change, just the method of measurement changed. The amount by which you wanted to amplify with functional gain was identical to the amount that you wanted to amplify with insertion gain. Only this was behavioral and this was non-behavioral. This required the client to sit there and do his hearing thresholds again, and this one didn't. The target that was derived here was found on the computer. You'd bink the hearing loss into the computer, and then you'd choose now R, and all of a sudden, boop, there's the target would pop up. Or you could bink the hearing loss into the computer and choose burger, and a burger target for that particular loss would pop up. Everybody fairly clear on what we've talked about today that way? Angela, ask me a question.
Okay, are we going to have to be able to calculate the targets when we're talking about now R, or will the computer do that for us?
The computer does that for you.
Okay.
But on a quiz or a midterm, I might have you calculate the NAL target, and I'll give you the tools to do it. I'll say, what is the first thing NAL looks at? And you'll say pure tone average times 0.05. What's the second thing that NAL asks for? And you'd say each threshold multiplied by 0.3. Okay, and then I'd give you the table. I'd give you the table 250 at 17, 500 at 8. I'd lay that on the side, and I'd say calculate the NAL target for 500 hertz based on what I've given you. Calculate the NAL target at 1,000 based on what I've given you. That I will do.
Okay. And so here in your notes and my notes, after I calculate the pure tone average, which is 1002 divided by 3, am I going to then pick, like, say, 500 frequency and take the 500, multiply it by 0.31?
Correct.
And then go on
to the table.
Yeah, which I have it here listed out at 500. I would subtract 8.
Correct. So you'd add the pure tone average that you took your pure tone average, you multiplied that by 0.05.
Yes.
Add the threshold in question that you multiplied by 0.31.
Okay.
Okay. And then you'd add the correction factor on that little table. Those three things together, you'd add, and that would be your target gain.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I got that. I think I got it.
Good.
Thank you.
It's such a more enjoyable session when there's people attending. I can't tell you. It's like such a drag when no one's there. It just sucks. You should have seen one Academy before you guys. I'm just sitting there like a monologue talking into this computer, and here at least we got some engagement going back and forth. Any other questions so far? We good? All right. Next week, we're going to look at today's fitting methods and how those develop. Let's just see, before we get out of here, I want to just make sure that what I've told you about. Let's see. See, how far did we get in all this? Oh yeah, this is kind of a cool slide too. This is out of Valenti. See, here's functional gain for some particular loss. So here's the hearing loss. Here's functional gain. Could be NAL, could be Burger, could be Pogo, whatever. Just call it hearing aid fitting method X. And here's insertion gain. And here's the target. This is what you want. Notice how the numbers are identical. That's the point he's trying to stress. I did it here and here, and he's trying to tell you the very same thing here. Only he's told the story way before me, because he told the story in 1994. I've waited until 2018, 2019. Okay? So, and then here, note only one target because all hearing aids were linear. Same gain at all inputs. Never make the mistake of thinking linear hearing aids give the same gain at all frequencies. I almost always put that as a multiple choice question, and invariably someone says true. And that's so patently false. That would mean linear hearing aids were giving a flat gain across all the frequencies. It's not true. It's nothing to do with frequencies. They give the same gain for all input intensities, for a whisper, to average, to a shout. And here's insertion gain. We're showing you a hearing loss. and they're showing you a target based on some fitting method, and you're seeing, oh, the hearing aid was doing this. Okay, better reduce this, better increase this, because you want it more to look like this. You want them to be fairly close. Okay, so Valenti is just showing you that that functional gain, you're getting remember, the formulas didn't change, just the method of measurement changed. And then here he's showing you, yeah, here's your target, and you want to adjust your hearing aid until you match the target. Always remember, the first measurement you did was unaided response, then aided response, and then the computer simply subtracted these two REUR from here, and you got this. And you want that to match target. So the black dotted line is the result of REUR subtracting REUR of the blue, subtracting the yellow gives you the black. All right. In the early days of REM, real ear measurement, we looked a lot at outer ear canal resonance. Real ear basics, we'll talk more about that mañana, but let's see. Just want to see where we are in this particular presentation here. Well, it's kind of neat. I mean, Sam's done this 1,000 times, but I mean, this isn't the system he may have, but this is just a system of real ear. You're hanging the real ear things around the guy's ears, and the red would be for the right, and the blue would be for the left, and here's the little tube going in the guy's ears. And here's your speaker. And you're hanging this loop around the ear, and you're putting this little tube. You want to make sure, and we'll talk more about this later, about how you calibrate real ear and how it works. But I think next week I'm going to start with this slide. And then we'll go into, I'll talk a little bit about doing real ear, and then we'll go into today's fitting methods. So this is where I'll start next week, and then we'll, for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll go into today's fitting methods, which is Unit 4. Okay? All righty then. Good enough. Stop sharing. Shut my face. Adios, amigos. We'll look at you later. Live long and prosper. I'm out of here. So are you. All right. Catch you later.
See you, Dr. Ted.
Hey, hey.